Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Ashram Talks discussion. I think it's only a natural tendency to kind of ask ourselves sometimes, like, why am I here, right? Or what am I supposed to do? So we're going to kind of explore the idea today. What if we were all, quote unquote, put here for a purpose? What are we supposed to do? And how can we start to kind of approach that and take that into account as we go through our daily lives? So we're going to be joined by Hari Priya today to explore this topic with us a little bit deeper through the lens of the Gita. Welcome, Hari Priya. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm wonderful. Happy to be here.
Awesome. We're so happy to have you. So whenever you're ready, we can get started.
All right, I'll dive right in. So I'm going to dive right in and read the verse because the purport, which is like the expansion, is so juicy that I'm going to read that too. It's only a little paragraph. Perform your prescribed duty, for action is better than inaction. A man cannot even maintain his physical body without work. There are many pseudo meditators who misrepresent themselves as belonging to high parentage or great professional men who falsely pose that they sacrificed everything for the sake of advanced spiritual life. But Lord Krishna did not want Arjuna to become a pretender, but that he perform his prescribed duty as set forth for a Kshatriya, a warrior. Arjuna was a householder and a military general, and therefore it was better for him to remain as such and perform his religious duties as prescribed for the householder Kshatriya. Such activities gradually cleanse the heart of a mundane man and free him from material contamination. So doing our prescribed duty in the right consciousness cleans our conditioning, right? So what I understand is that we have conditioning and we have natures. We have our nature. And so I'm going to actually quote a few verses today in the Bhagavad Gita that I love. Some are in chapter 3, a little later on, and some are in chapter 18, the conclusion of the Gita. And what I'm understanding is that the work that we're called to do, sometimes people think like, oh, I'm welcome, Colleen. Sometimes people ask this question like, I want to do this, but should I? Is it right? Is it wrong? Is it good? Is it bad? And I want to bring something up, and it's a personal story actually. And it's when I was probably in my early 20s, and I asked a spiritual practitioner, someone who gives classes all the time, and I said, I'm inclined towards psychology. Should I get my master's? Should I pursue that? Or, should I focus just on spiritual life and like go live in India and clean my heart more, fast where I'm, chanting, meditating, etc. And I said, or should I, sometimes I want to be an actress. Should I act? Should I do psychology? What should I do? What should I do? And I was a little stunned. She gave what I consider is incomplete advice. And she said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do. And I remember being kind of dumbfounded and not feeling like I had much clarity. And now in my 40s, I realize that what she meant was accurate in the sense that it doesn't matter what job we choose. It doesn't matter what inclination that we have, whether it's psychology or acting, or being Brahminical and like learning the scriptures so thoroughly in India, where then I would probably become a teacher. So any of those are fine. Any of those are going to nourish me if it's my inclination, if it's my nature, if it's my inspiration. And we can utilize spiritual consciousness, spiritual awareness in any of those fields. So, in that sense, it doesn't matter, but it does matter. It matters for us to choose something that we're inclined towards. Like if, certain people are saying, you need to do this job, and your nature, you're feeling like, no, that doesn't feel right to me. It's not my dharma. It's not my nature. It's not my inclination. So then you might get conflicted. Like, should I follow their advice or should I do what my calling is? And so in the Bhagavad Gita, and I'll share some more quotes to elaborate on that. But Krishna basically says, follow your nature. Follow your nature. What good does repression do? And that's one of the verses. So I'll read a little bit more of this purport, and then I'll find that verse. It says, so-called renunciation for the purpose of maintenance. And here he's responding to it as in Arjuna's question. See, so Arjuna says, should I just give all this up? Should I just go to the forest and meditate? And Krishna says, no, you're a military general. Like, should a military general who has a wife and children, who sustains wife and children, go sit in the forest and, beg for their food? Like, just have a bowl out, collecting whatever people donate, and all you're doing is meditating on God all day? That's what Arjuna asked. Should I just give up this work because of the various consequences? And should I go to the forest and meditate and become more like a Brahmin? So here, very clearly in the purport and in the text, Krishna is saying, no, you're not a Brahmin. You are a spiritual soul within this conditioning, within this nature of a military general. And so do that duty and think of me. Do that duty for me. Do that duty as an offering to me. And that's how we shift, whether I'm a psychologist and I'm helping people raise their consciousness, raise their awareness of their nature so that they can more closely know themselves as, I'll say, the driver of the car, that they can know that this body is like a car and that the conscious self, is the driver of the car. So that's of service. Or if I want to be an actress and I can act in dramas that actually elevate consciousness, that have storylines that elevate consciousness, that bring us to higher awareness of ourselves, of our nature, of the soul, etc. Or even if I'm doing something that's not directly related, I can be in service even with the people that I interact with. So that means day to day, we meet people all the time. We communicate with people all the time, whatever our career is, whatever our job is. And in that communication, I like this. There's a quote, I think it's Paul Tillich, who says, the first duty of love is to listen. So in that communication with people, we have an opportunity actually to serve God every moment we're communicating with someone. The way we listen and understand them, and that immediately is a loving exchange. And if we're in that awareness that this is the person that's in front of me is a child of God, and I'm going to really listen to them and seek to understand. And then from there, real deep communication can occur. And then in that space, you're also helping that person raise their awareness about themselves, raise their awareness about the situation, because you're in the consciousness of you matter. You matter. I'm really listening. So now you're actually providing love and care to that person in what's called a sattvic fashion, a mode of goodness fashion. So while doing that, that's a service. That's a service to God, because you're providing love and care for someone who God cares about. So we can actually transform any career into an offering of love to God through every single interaction we have. So here, when he's talking about pretenders, he's referring to people who maybe they have material desires inside. They're like, maybe they want fame, and then they become like yogis. Like, I'm a yogi and I'm on Instagram and I'm going to show you all these meditation things. And really, I want 2 million followers, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm saying they might have a motive, which is maybe they don't feel connected to God. Maybe they don't feel that fulfillment of a deep, loving relationship with their source. So they're seeking to fill a hole inside, an emptiness inside, by getting a lot of accolades, a lot of followers. So there's people in India that do it as well. There's Westerners that do it, where they're wanting to become famous by being a spiritualist, right? Like, let me show you how I meditate and how I just hear Om for all day long, or let me show you these different feats that I have. And so Srila Prabhupada, who's writing this purport, is explaining that we don't want to become pretenders, that we don't want to deny what's actually happening for us. So that requires introspection. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that requires us knowing ourselves. That requires us even asking questions. Like, we might ask questions like, what are my real motives here? And maybe we're not going to share that with others, or maybe we are going to share that in confidence with someone so that we can really bring it to light and get clarity on it. Oh, like, why, how come I do want X, Y, or Z result? And then we get to go deeper and know ourselves better. And Srila Prabhupada is basically saying, whatever your nature is, which is like your inclination, you can follow that and transform it spiritually by all the spiritual things we've talked about that so many have shared, and I know I've shared, where spiritual duties, right? So there's the material duties. Don't neglect your material duties of being a warrior here, or of following your calling, your inspiration, your service to the world. And your spiritual duties are saying God's name again and again, hearing it so that you can remember who you are and connect more deeply with that personality who loves you, who misses you, who wishes you spent more time thinking of them. And we'll share a little bit about what Krishna says in the 18th chapter. And so as we read books that we're doing now, or spend time with spiritual people, or hear kirtan, spiritual sound vibrations, or offer kirtan, sing glories, sing the names of God, or spiritual songs that are in glorification of our source, of God, then all those things, they're cleaning our hearts. And then our consciousness transforms. And then any work that we're doing, that enthused consciousness of knowing who you are, knowing you're loved by God, feeling more and more love for God, now your work also takes on a whole nother quality, right? So instead of changing your work and not following your inclinations because you're tentative about it, but follow them, follow that inclination, and do your spiritual work side by side. And as you follow your inclination and you're doing your spiritual work, your consciousness will raise and you'll feel more connected. And then your interactions in that working platform will be infused with spiritual awareness, with knowledge of you being loved by God, of the person in front of you being loved by God. And then all the interactions get transformed. So I'm going to just read a little bit more. So he said, yes, so-called renunciation for the purpose of maintenance is never approved by the Lord, nor by any religious scripture. After all, one has to maintain one's body and soul together by some work. So we're going to have to work. Work should not be given up capriciously without purification of materialistic propensities. So sometimes what happens is we feel bad about ourselves. We wish we were more spiritual than we are. And I think that's what was happening in my 20s. I had an inclination to study, but I also had an inclination to do other things. And so we can do both side by side. But to totally give up the material world and say, I'm just gonna dive into spiritual things, we can do that usually in the early stages. You know, there's different 4 categories of life. And when we're a student, that's wonderful. But once, for example, Arjuna is already married with children. So once we have responsibilities, once we're an adult and we're living in this world, then at that point, if we become renounced, but we actually still have material desires, that's a pretender. Because it's better to say, I have an inclination towards spiritual life, and I have these responsibilities, and I also still have material desires. So let me work, let me offer my time and my energy as a service for the family, for myself, to maintain my own body as well, so that I'm not a dependent on others. And be honest that I'm still cleaning my heart of all these desires to enjoy, these desires to be, to be like God, to be the center of attention, or to be the one that, like they say, lorded over material nature, which means like to be gaining from others, gaining, whether it's gaining attention or gaining accolade or gaining money or gaining, prestige. So if we still have these desires to gain from others, then we're not ready. We're not ready to give up all material activities and dedicate ourselves to a spiritual, fully 24/7, only reading and chanting and kirtan and giving classes. Because so if we were ready to do that, then we wouldn't have these material propensities. And so I've seen it. I've seen like husbands say, well, I want to go live in India and I want to be transcendental and spiritual. And yet they have children. So God has given you children who depend on you, who need you. So to give that up, for example, if Arjuna just went to the forest, then like what would his wives do? How would they be maintained? What would his children do? So it's very clear that it's better for Arjuna to stay and work and fight, and it's better for a husband and a father to serve his family, clean his heart, chant and read in the home, chant and read in the home, purify his heart. And then the fourth stage of life is actually called, well, it could be vanaprasth for some or sannyas for some. So there's a stage as we get into older age where you can just go live in the forest or go live in India and live in an ashram and meditate all the time. So there's different stages. There's the student, there's the householder, then there's, vanaprasth, where you're still with your family, but maybe you're having certain detachments from certain lifestyles that are like more based on material enjoyment versus spiritual awakening, right? And then if you're inclined, then there's sannyas, where you like really do give everything up. So if you have a spiritual teacher, like a guru, like Srila Prabhupada, who said to young people, you take sannyas, right? And that's different because that's your guru's giving you an instruction. But we're speaking more of people who are householders, who are already responsible. They already have a service to their family and children. And then what they do can be fully spiritual, full spiritual, while engaging in what looks like material life by transforming their consciousness, by doing all the spiritual activities that transform their consciousness, so that in the material interactions, they're actually always serving God. They're actually always serving by the awareness of who's in front of them, being a child of God. So it says, yes, work should not be given up capriciously, without actually purifying the material propensities, without purifying those material desires. Anyone who's in this material world is certainly possessed of some impure propensities. So it's okay. It's okay that we have material desires. That's why we're here. So all of us have them, or we wouldn't be here. So let's not deny them. Let's see them and let's work with them and let's clean them. Let's purify them. So those propensities, we have the propensity of lording it over material nature, right? Trying to be the enjoyer or having sense gratification, like just giving the senses whatever they want. So we're almost done this purport. Such polluted propensities have to be cleared. Without doing so through prescribed duties, by doing our work and shifting our consciousness and spending time in spiritual activities and spending time in our consciousness spiritual while we do the work, being aware, I can offer this to God. So through the prescribed duties, one should never attempt to become a so-called transcendentalist, renouncing work and living at the cost of others. So that's this verse that we're on today. And to go even a little bit more deep, and you'll be able, I'm just going to touch on these other verses because those classes are coming. But 333, which is just a few verses, some verses away, it says, even a man of knowledge acts according to his own nature, for everyone follows his nature. What can repression accomplish? So Krishna is saying, don't try to repress yourself. Don't try to suppress your natural tendency, your natural inclination. Follow it and offer it to God. Follow it and do spiritual activities that transform your consciousness. So the next two verses later, 335, it says, it is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though they may be faulty. So like, even if I'm scared that I won't do, like maybe I won't do any job that I'm inclined towards, maybe I won't do it that well, right? So let's look at that. Let's look at that fear and see the fear. But here Krishna is saying, even though it might be faulty, even though we might do it in a not so fabulous way, like choppy way or with faults, mistakes. He says, even though they may be faulty. So it is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though they may be faulty, than another's duties, than following the nature of another, than following the path of another. And then it says, destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is even better than engaging in another's duty, for to follow another's path is dangerous. See, and I'll read a little bit of that purport. One should therefore discharge his prescribed duties in full Krishna consciousness, just being aware of God. Try to align your life in a way that you're thinking about God all throughout the day, rather than those prescribed for others. Prescribed duties complement one's psychophysical condition under the spell of the modes of material nature. So we do have these cars, we do have these vehicles, these bodies. Like, I know my body. I have like a full throttle, super passionate nature. And to pretend I don't, and to say, oh, I'm gonna restrain those and I'm gonna just follow this other path, it's not authentic. And when I follow something that's inauthentic, it's much more dangerous, because if I don't even have basic self-honesty, then how am I going to get deeper honesty, deeper layers of honesty about who I am? If I can't even see that the car that I'm in is one that has a lot of passion and energy to it, then I won't know how to utilize it, right? So if I see it and I accept it, then I can utilize it. I can engage it. So I can even be grateful for it. Like, oh, wow, Krishna, you've given me this passion and this drive. So let me use it for you. Let me use it in your service. That's going to be much more fulfilling. It's going to clean my heart, and it's going to last my whole life. Whereas if I try to pretend like, oh, I'm going to avoid these inclinations. Like, I'm not going to act because maybe I'll go to, acting is, oh, maybe it's fame and wealth, and that's not good for my spiritual life. So I shouldn't do that. And so there's something to be said for trusting God enough that you can pray sincerely, like, guide me from the inside. I'm going to start to follow this path. If it's not right for me, close those doors. I'm going to follow this path. If it's right for me, open those doors. So there's a difference between using your intelligence to not put yourself in a situation and in the company of things that will be harmful for your spiritual life, versus denying your nature. And as you deny your nature and you deny your inclination or your propensity, then because of fear, right? So if it's fear that is helping you deny that propensity, if it's fear, then let's look at that fear. What are you scared of? And how can you support yourself to eliminate that fear? So if, for example, acting is a good one, I personally decided not to go towards the acting path, and for various reasons, but it wasn't because of fear. It was because of intelligence, right? And only we can know. Only we can truly know. Can I go down this path and it's going to put me in a situation where I'm going to forget who I am? Or can I go down this path and really purify myself enough that I'm going to use this path in service? That I'm going to use this path in cleaning my own heart and cleaning the hearts of others just by being in their company. So, and supporting myself, by being spiritually strong. So he says, destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duty, for to follow another's path is dangerous. One should therefore discharge his prescribed duties in full God consciousness, Krishna consciousness, rather than the prescribed duties for others. Because it matches our psychophysical nature. And then it speaks about spiritual duties. Spiritual duties are as ordered by the spiritual teachers, the spiritual masters. So for the transcendental service of God. So there's material duties and there's spiritual duties. And we can spend a few minutes each day in contemplation. Like, if you're really in that question, like the title of the class indicates, if you're really in that sincere question, like, what should I do? Like, what should I do with my life? What is my calling? How do I know, what God wants for me? I want to offer something. So what God really wants is for you to love him. What God really wants is a spiritual relationship with you, a relationship where you spend time with him, where you remember him, where you offer things to him. And in doing that, you're allowed to follow your psychophysical nature. God's telling you in this book, follow your psychophysical nature for your work. and offer that work to him. So there's two things side by side. And I think a lot of times I've seen people, and I did it myself, I've seen people act as though God should tell them what career to be in, where it's like, God, what should I do? Should I do this or should I do that? And I'll invite us to have an honest look at ourselves. Is there fear of making a mistake? Is that the motive? And maybe there's other motives, but I know that became I saw that for me, when I asked a few questions, I went introspective. I saw, oh, yeah, I'm scared of making a mistake. So then I get to look at that. That's about me. Maybe, that's about my conditioning. So do I want to give it to God, give the responsibility to God because I'm scared of making a mistake? Like, I'm just going to put it on God. I'm waiting to see what God will give me. I'm waiting to see what guidance he'll give me. I wish Krishna would just tell me what job to do. I wish Krishna would just, and here in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is clearly saying, follow your nature. Follow your nature. It's that simple. So what is your nature? Don't deny it. Don't repress it, right? We just read that. What's the point of repression? Utilize it. So, and then Confucius says, it's a quote accredited to him. It says, if you love what you do, you'll never have to work another day in your life. So let's do what we love. If you have other choices, that, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you do what you're inclined towards and you offer it to God, then you can easily follow a lot of Bhagavad Gita teachings. Like, you have a right to your work, but not a right to the fruits. So like, when we look at that, does that say we should do this job because it'll lead to this fruit? Or does it say we should follow our nature? And in that, now we're free. We're living in the moment. We're not thinking like the carrot and the stick, like, I've got to do this so that I can get that. As soon as we're doing our job for the money or for the result, then we're misaligned. We're no longer aligned in spiritual teachings, because the spiritual teachings are, you're allowed to work, and you do that work as an offering to God. And the fruits, obviously we maintain ourselves with a lot of the fruits, but we're not allowed to be like just attached to the fruits, if that makes sense, because as we try to enjoy those fruits more than necessary, more than we need to be comfortable, also, like, we need balance. So, for example, we need a vacation. It's not like that sense enjoyment. That's balance. We need certain things. We need a home. We need clothes. We need nice food. We need time to, we need to take care of our bodies. These are all creating balance. But if we're thinking, I want $2 million so that I can fly here and there, and it's like, okay, really, let's look at that. Is there a hole inside? Is there some kind of void inside that you're trying to fill? And I'm almost positive that hole inside is not going to be filled by the $2 million and the jet and the whatever it is. Because I know people who have those things and they're still hungry for something. They're still not satisfied. So feeding ourselves, then when we feel this bliss of the soul alive to itself and a loving relationship with God, then we don't need a goal. Like, we don't need the external fruit anymore. And then the work that we're doing takes on a whole different quality. So we do that work as an offering, and we do that work with like spiritual consciousness, and that's what's fulfilling to the soul, because our soul actually is not going to be fulfilled by anything material, because we're not made of matter, right? We're made of something other than matter. And I want to go into that, but I won't, because we're short on time. So I'm just going to stick to reading. There's another one I wanted to say. So let's see. I wanted to read this other verse, two other verses really quick before we close. So they're in chapter 18, which is it's said to be the most confidential knowledge. But I'm assuming if you're sitting here and if you're wanting to be here in the Bhagavad Gita class, then you're, because it says, don't share this with people who are like jealous of God. Don't share this with people who are not inclined towards spiritual life. So, but it's shared here in the Bhagavad Gita at the end in chapter 18. So it's 1847 and 65 is what I wanted to read. So 1847 is, it is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. And it's going to be much less satisfying. If we do something that's not our calling and we do it perfectly, we're going to feel much less satisfied than if we do our calling and we don't, and we're not perfect at it. Prescribed duties according to one's nature are never affected by, it says, sinful reactions, by reactions that take us away from the soul, that take us away from God. And then it's one of my favorite verses, famous verse. Always think of me and become my devotee. Worship me and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says he's speaking to Arjuna because Arjuna is his friend. And he said, and anyone who follows in this path of Arjuna can become that very dear friend of Krishna. And Krishna is a friend to all, but he's a special friend to those who really spend time with him, those who really care about him and ask in their minds, like, oh, how can I think of you more or offer things to you a little bit more each day? So that's the close of the class today. And yeah, I encourage you to, there's one last thing that one of my teachers said to me. He said, if we have anarthas, if we have like these weeds in our heart, in the garden of our heart, and we go and follow a certain path and those weeds come up, then we get to pull them. We get to pull those weeds from our heart and nourish the devotional flower that's in our heart. And if we don't follow that path from fear of, well, I'll just say from fear, because people can be fearful of many different things, but just from fear, then we don't get this opportunity to see maybe ugly things that come up. Because if we see the ugly qualities that come up, then we can be humble. We can be humble and like, oh wow, I'm really not pure. I really have some ugly motives here, or I have some, not so beautiful qualities. And it's like, let's love ourselves and accept ourselves where we are, because all of us are in the same boat, or we wouldn't be on planet Earth. So instead of trying to pretend that we're somewhere we're not, let's be where we are. And as even they're called anarthas, or unwanted qualities, like even if like selfishness or jealousy or anger, or if these things come up as we do our work, then we get to look at them and we get to spend more time with God to clean our hearts, to let them go, or we get to pray, please help me take away these qualities. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Hari Priya. Amazing discussion. You touched on so many important points. Yeah, I think when we're starting to maybe become part of a spiritual community, or we're growing up in a spiritual community, we start to worry, like, am I not going to be spiritual enough? Or maybe, some people might think like, oh, am I going to become, too spiritual? And I'm going to forget about all my responsibilities? And in that, we could lose sight so easily, right, of just being ourselves, or asking ourselves, okay, where am I really in all of this?
Mm,
Yeah, and just talking about your
yeah.
experiences reminds me a lot, like when I was graduating high school, I felt so strongly, right, that I needed to go to college, and people in my spiritual community were telling me, not to do that would be really detrimental. And I was so persistent that they kind of said, okay, fine, go, but you have to study this and you have to pursue only this profession. And I thought, like,
Mm,
but I don't, that's not me, right? I don't see myself doing that. So I think these topics are really relatable to all of us. I think we go through different, like, coming of age stages in life. I'm sure there's not just one. But yeah, I mean, what should we do if we're, maybe doing something that everyone is telling us is a good thing, but we feel like it's not? Or maybe, the flip side, we really want to pursue something and we feel that that's what we should do, but people in our life, or people who are advising us, people in our community, are maybe telling us, that would be the wrong thing. And then there's kind of some tension there.
mm. Yeah, well, so it's very interesting. I mean, maybe some parents are going to be upset with me, because I mean, it says to me, I mean, it seems so clear. Like Krishna is very clearly saying, follow your nature. And really, truly, only we know. Only when we have a calling. Why is it called a calling? We feel like this, we're like compelled, right? There's this, so it's like only we know what that feels like. You can't tell your mom or explain to your dad, like, no, inside I really feel this. Like, I mean, you can say those words, but you feel it, right? And so there's many, like I've seen many spiritual people who became a doctor or a lawyer because it was like, you do this because it makes good money. And then once you're making good money, you can have your spiritual life. And it seems very wise. And I guess we would have to interview them. I guess we'd have to ask them, like, how do you feel now that you're a doctor and a lawyer? And maybe it didn't feel like what you wanted to do when you were in your 20s. And now you're there. But yeah, maybe you have a bigger budget. So now you can, you know, choose what you do. I would be so actually, I'm going to do some research between now and next class. I'm going
Yeah,
to actually, I know like 5 or 6 doctors and lawyers. I'm just going to ask them.
definitely.
I'm curious how many of the people who followed that instruction of their parent also felt interested in that field, right? Like, so I'm like, if you're torn, it's not like I was torn between theater and psychology. And now I see either one would have been my calling, could have been my calling because I love both. So, in that sense, better to do it, better to just go down a path because we waste so much time in our like mental, like, should I not, should I mean, if it takes a month or two, that's normal, that's healthy. We go through a state of contemplation. But if it's been a year or 2 years, like it was for me, it was at least 3 or 4 or 5 years that I was in the question: should I pursue psychology? Should I get my MSW? My dad was like, no, 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 you're too thin skinned. You'll take it all home, So like, and then I listened to that and I thought about it. But if I had done my MSW, I didn't have to be a social worker. I could have just had that under my belt. Like, ironically, the person who's leading these self development seminars that I'm now leading the first time ever in January, who trained me, he has an MSW and he's not a social worker.
Yeah.
He's used all of his knowledge, right, to serve consciousness, raising awareness, raising consciousness, it's called Sattva Tov because he wants people to come to Sattva, to come to a wider range of choice by awareness, right? So I realized my dad had great intentions. He loved me and he wanted to protect me. And it's not that whatever we do is the end, like, so if we follow our inclinations, we can, and then even if I say, I don't want anything to do with psychology now. I did it. It's not really interesting to me. Okay, so what? Then at least now I know. I went down that path and it's not a waste because now it's an experience. So that's what I encourage younger people now because I see how inefficient it is to just like teeter, like, what's my calling, what should I do? And I was in it for so many years. I was like, I want spiritual psychology. That's really what I wanted spiritual psychology, like spirituality and psychology. And I didn't see that in the world. And now, okay, now I found it. But anything that I had done along the way could have contributed to my wealth of knowledge in what I'm doing now. So I would say if your parents are guiding you, it's with best intentions and they love you. And at the same time, if you follow your I'll call it your gut, but really more appropriately, it's your Paramatma, your internal guide, Krishna right there in the heart telling you like, yeah, do this. And it's your dharma, it's your nature. It's the psychophysical nature you were born with for a reason because you had these inclinations last lifetime. So then if you follow that, there's actually no harm because you can always transform it. You can actually always redirect it. Like any field can be spiritualized with, some good guidance and intelligence and some purifying of yourself.
Yeah, that's so important to keep in mind, right? Like, I feel like the summary of what you're saying is yeah, don't worry about what you do, but do something and you can make that spiritual, right? And you can seek guidance in doing that, and it's going to be a process, right? That maybe you improve over time. But I love that. I love kind of encouraging us to, yeah, act versus not act, or say yes rather than saying no, or rather than saying I'm not sure. So I think, yeah, we're definitely going to be exploring a lot of really interesting and relevant topics as we go through chapter 3. And thanks so much for sharing kind of more of your insights and your story. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you all. And really, what Krishna, it's not that Krishna wants a certain job for you. Krishna wants you to love him. That's it. And the spiritual path is always there, whatever career you choose.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Hari Priya, for sharing. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you Monday at 7:30 p.m. to continue with Chapter 3.